Good morning. So glad you've chosen to join us on this lovely spring day in November. Feels like a new beginning. I'm Martha Childs, proud member of your hardworking standing committee. I want to call your attention to this week's Community Matters. There are upcoming events from our dedicated and creative RE committee. By the way, if you're in the neighborhood, check out the sidewalk mural by the church, created by this energetic group. And good news, there's still some jam left to buy. Don't miss out. As well as many opportunities to engage and participate in workshops and small groups. Welcome to worship at First Church Unitarian, Littleton.
Good morning. My name is Molly Lozeau. I'm the music director at First Church Unitarian. I am happy to introduce our Prelude today. The title of the piece is Aurora Borealis, which describes the northern lights. The composer you'll hear is Lynda Lybeck-Robinson, and she lived in Alaska for a while, and she wrote a lot of music based on what she saw while she was living in Alaska. So here's Aurora Borealis.
It is now when we are called as witnesses of the world, to mend it, to change its course, to restore it. It is now when we are called to act on our values, not to hide, not to fear, but to be bold and loud. It is now that we are called to continue our fight for justice, to organize, to speak up, It is now. Let us gather. Let us give each other courage. And let us worship. The words of Tania, Márquez. Now is the time for having our chalice lighting and the words of our covenant. So if you have a candle at home or a chalice and you'd like to light it and say the words, we'll be led this morning by Riley Hammer.
Love is the spirit of this church and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace and to seek the truth in love and to help one another.
Good morning. Yes, good morning and welcome to the virtual worship service of First Church Unitarian here in Littleton, Massachusetts. My name is Lara Hoke, and I am so happy and lucky to be the minister of this awesome congregation. Oh, boy, you know, today would have been an interesting and fun day to be together, but it was not to be. But we're here together virtually, and I look forward to talking with you on our Zoom afterwards. And I'm glad that you are with us now online. And if you just found us today on YouTube Live, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Or if you found us before, welcome back. It's great to have you with us. I'm going to start off with a few thank yous, as always. Thank you to Martha Childs for sharing our community matters this morning. Thank you to Chris Ursland, who puts it out every week. Thank you, of course, to Riley Hammer for doing our chalice lighting and covenant reading this morning. Thank you to Melissa Baern. Melissa's sharing our story, Our Time for All Ages this morning. Thank you to Molly Lozeau for our music today with some cameos. As you will see coming up later, we'll say something about that. And as always, thank you to Mike for helping us out, showing videos and helping us with tech. This week has been an interesting week. I don't know about you, but I've run the gamut of emotions from Tuesday until really yesterday, and even a slightly different emotion this morning. But you will notice during this morning's homily or sermon that it's a little different from my normal preaching in that I get to name names. We're no longer in an election season. I can't say anything that would influence any votes. Votes are done, they're in. And so post-election sermons every 4 years are unique. So I just wanted to give you the heads up that it will feel different, certainly in that way. Okay, so let's enjoy our morning. And I think that's all I wanted to tell you. And I'm going to invite Molly to come and introduce our opening hymn, number 318.
Our opening hymn is 318. I'm happy to say that today you're going to hear the voices of Peggy and Carl Britton. Last spring when we went remote, I had a couple choir members help me out with some of the hymns. So you'll hear me playing organ and you'll hear them singing, and please sing along with them.
strive to make us free.
Oh, thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear your voices, Peggy and Carl, and also wonderful to hear the organ, the church organ. So thank you, Molly. It's my pleasure now to introduce our Time for All Ages. This morning it will be shared by Melissa Baern, as I said before. It's an adaptation of The Healing Cup, the story of the Flaming Chalice by Noreen Kimball. Enjoy.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Melissa Baern, and I have a true story to tell you. It's about spies and art and Unitarians, and it's about our flaming chalice. Every Sunday, FCU kids open our service with a ritual we share with many Unitarian Universalist churches. We light a flame inside a chalice. Have you ever wondered why? I bet you're not expecting this story to begin with Unitarian spies and secret agents. In World War II, Nazi Germany invaded Eastern Europe and began imprisoning and murdering Jews and other people that the Nazis hated, including, in fact, Unitarians. It was a horrible, terrifying time. So many people were desperate to flee from the deadly danger in their own countries and find somewhere they could live in safety. A group of Unitarians from right here in Boston formed the Unitarian Service Committee, our USC, to help. Maybe you didn't know that Unitarians could be spies and secret agents with a minister as the spy master. Their leader, the Reverend Charles Joy, ran this network from Lisbon, Portugal. As the only open European port in the early 1940s, Lisbon drew millions of refugees. Reverend Joy had a whole secret group of agents and messengers working hard to find safe routes for those in danger to escape the Nazis. Once the refugees got to Lisbon, Reverend Joy and his team tried to find them new places to live. Reverend Joy and his secret network were determined to help as many as they could, but the USC was brand new and very small, and no one had ever heard of it. And this created some problems. One problem was that those who were trying to escape the Nazis and the people who wanted to help them often didn't speak the same language. But they had to figure out very quickly who they could trust and who might betray them. Disguises, signs and countersigns, and midnight runs across guarded borders meant freedom in those days. Reverend Joy thought if the USC had an official symbol or picture, then it wouldn't matter if people didn't share a common language. They'd know they could trust each other when they recognized that symbol. Another big problem was that many of the refugees had fled their home countries without their travel papers or passports. Travel papers were like golden tickets, magic papers that let you cross borders from one country to another. Without them, you were stuck without a country. Just the way we have to get driver's licenses and passports from our governments, people then had to get travel papers from their own governments, but now that was impossible. Reverend Joy had a brilliant idea. The USC would issue travel papers itself. Of course, since no one had ever heard of the USC, he'd have to make them look terribly important and very official, so border guards wouldn't just laugh when they saw them and toss them in the trash. Once again, he thought, the USC needed a symbol. So Reverend Joy needed an artist. A very talented cartoonist named Hans Deutsch had escaped the Nazi invasion of Paris, France, where he was in danger because he drew cartoons making fun of Adolf Hitler, the Nazi leader, and showing how evil the Nazis were. When Deutsch made his way to Lisbon and met Reverend Joy, he had never heard anything about Unitarianism. He'd never heard a sermon, and he didn't share in any faith himself. But in the Reverend Charles Joy, he saw a man giving everything of himself that he possibly could to serve others who were in the greatest possible need. When the Reverend asked him to create a symbol that could be both a secret sign and an official seal, Deutsch was inspired. He took up his pencil and his ink, and he drew a chalice topped by a flame. Do you know what a chalice is? It's a special kind of cup with a stem and a foot that is used for giving a healing or sacred drink to others. Reverend Joy said its shape reminded him of the lamps of holy oil used by the ancient Greeks and Romans on their altars. The flame itself, he said, represented a spirit of helpfulness, sacrifice, and love. So, our flaming chalice represents all these things: taking care of others when they need help, making sacrifices for them, loving them, finding something holy in that love. For the rest of the war, Deutsch's flaming chalice design was used as a seal for papers and a badge for agents secretly moving refugees to freedom. And slowly, the flaming chalice went from a wartime symbol used by a determined group of unlikely secret agents to the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. It was a long time after the war that Unitarian Universalists actually started lighting chalices in our services. And you know what? It was the kids who started it. They made chalices in religious education programs. And then, in children and youth-led services, they lit those chalices for the adults in their congregations. Sometime in the 1980s, UUs began to adopt the chalice lighting ceremony inspired by their children. So, what does it mean to have a symbol like this? Well, when we light the chalice at the beginning of our service every Sunday, we enjoy it because it is a beautiful thing to do. But it also means that wherever you see a flaming chalice, you know that there are Unitarian Universalists nearby. And that reminds us of the values we share: service, social justice, love. Our chalice symbol can bring our people together. And it can remind you that kids can light up the world.
Thank you so much, Melissa. So appreciated for that wonderful telling of that story. Little known fact, your minister, that would be me, I am a spy master of sorts. I'm a former special agent for NCIS. Strange but true. Stories to tell you someday, but not right now. Now is the time for our offering. As you know, First Church Unitarian here in Littleton, Massachusetts is self-sustaining, and we rely on members and friends for their generosity to keep us going, to keep our good works going, both here for our own community and for the wider community as well. You see the address here. If you want to mail in a check, that's the address to mail it to. And you could also go to the website. That's the website link as well, fculittle.org. Once you get there, you'll see a yellow donate button, and you can click on that, and it will tell you all the ins and outs of donating online if you choose to do that. So this morning's offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation.
The music you'll hear for your offertory today is For Elise by Ludwig van Beethoven. I wanted to find something that was familiar for everybody, maybe as a little bit of a comfort for today. Give your brains a break. You'll probably recognize the first melody. Now, this entire piece is actually about 5 minutes long, and I'm curious about how many of you know the whole piece. So like I said, you'll recognize the first part, but maybe it'll go places that are unfamiliar, but still comforting.
This morning's reading is an excerpt from the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. Here begins the reading. When we go to the doctor, he or she will not begin to treat us without taking our history. And not just our history, but that of our parents and grandparents before us. The doctor will not see us until we have filled out many pages on a clipboard that is handed to us upon arrival. The doctor will not hazard a diagnosis until he or she knows the history going back generations. As we fill out the pages of our medical past and our current complaints, what our bodies have been exposed to and what they have survived, it does us no good to pretend that certain ailments have not beset us, to deny the full truths of what brought us to this moment. Few problems have ever been solved by ignoring them. Looking beneath the history of one's country is like learning that alcoholism or depression runs in one's family, or that suicide has occurred more often than might be usual, or with the advances in medical genetics, discovering that one has inherited the genetic markers for breast cancer. You don't ball up in a corner with guilt or shame at these discoveries. You don't, if you are wise, forbid any mention of them. In fact, you do the opposite. You educate yourself. You talk to people who have been through it and to specialists who have researched it. You learn the consequences and obstacles, the options and treatment. You may pray over it and meditate over it. Then you take precautions to protect yourself and succeeding generations and work to ensure that these things, whatever they are, don't happen again. Here ends the reading. I'm sorry, I see that I left on the virtual background. I apologize. Here I am. The Soul Matters theme for November is healing. And so today's sermon is titled Post-Election Healing. I have to be honest with you. When I settled on that title, I thought the vote would be more overwhelmingly against Donald Trump. I didn't expect US citizens to vote overwhelmingly for Joe Biden, but I expected them to vote overwhelmingly against Trump. And I thought I'd be preaching about healing in the context of an overwhelming mandate to move away from Trump and Trumpism. But that's not our context today. Trump will have to leave office. And that says something, since incumbents have such a big advantage in our elections. He's the first incumbent president since 1992 to lose. That's big. And the turnout was amazing, which is something to celebrate. But the vote was way too close. That's why I shared with you the reading that you just heard, The Vitals of History, the excerpt is called, from the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. The vote of 2020 shows that the vote of 2016 was not a fluke. Trumpism seems to have come to the fore largely in a reactionary response to Barack Obama, our first Black president. Trump, after all, was the one who brought us the birther conspiracy with its barely veiled racism. Trump's biggest delight has seemed to be to undo anything that Obama had done. Trump never offered a plan to replace Obamacare, as one example. He simply wanted to wipe it out of existence. Trump's inability to denounce white supremacist supporters, even ones espousing violence, whether it be David Duke of the KKK or the Proud Boys, his inability to denounce this is no mistake. Trumpism reveals for all to see that we have a wound that has never healed. And that is the wound from America's original sins, the sin of genocide of the Native American peoples, and the sin of slavery, and the racism and white supremacy that goes along with these sins. That is not to say there has been no progress, because there has been progress. But the wound is there, and Trumpism makes it impossible to ignore that reality. Joe Biden is the president-elect of the United States. And that's good news for the United States. I say that in as nonpartisan a way as I can, because whether or not you love our president-elect, whether he's too progressive for you or whether he's not progressive enough for you. He's not a fascistic, authoritarian leader. He's not a burgeoning dictator. He's not someone who has trouble denouncing white supremacists who are openly hostile to people of color. And Donald Trump has been all of those things. We have ousted the most dangerous United States president of our lifetime, period. To be honest, it feels premature to talk about healing. With the end of the Trump presidency, we can at least stop the bleeding. Healing is more than just the absence of active bleeding, but stopping the active bleeding is a necessary start. We will have that necessary start. Thank goodness. What else? What next for any possibility of post-election healing? You've probably all heard of that formula for when you are wounded, the RICE formula, rest, ice, compression, elevation. Let's start with rest for our healing. You know what? This is the best part of healing. We've had a rough 4 years, to say nothing of the nightmare of 2020. So give yourself some time to rest and enjoy and feel the joy. And you will need it for the days and years ahead. So soak it in. Evil lost this time. It was close, but the good guys, or the good enough guys, depending on your point of view, they won. You know what else? Our vice president-elect, Kamala Harris, is a woman, and she's a woman of color. She's African American and Indian American, and this is truly historic. It is to be celebrated. It took generations for a woman to achieve this, and it happened. So rest, celebrate, go ahead. It's an important part of healing. Next comes ice. I personally get tense thinking about ice. I don't know about you, but ice. We need to put ourselves on some ice. Cool down. Trump and Trumpism makes me livid. And it's a righteous anger, which is okay. It's biblical. It can be prophetic. But if we're going to heal as a nation, cooler heads will need to prevail. And we will have to be the cooler heads for the time being. And though we will celebrate, we should do our best not to gloat, because gloating, though oh so tempting and momentarily satisfying, it won't help us heal. I have gloated, I confess, somewhat on social media from time to time, mostly in direct tweets to the president himself, but I should stop. It will not help. We cannot be ones fanning the flames. There are enough people doing that. We need to be the cooler heads that prevail. Next comes compression. We need to hold each other tight. Yes, hold your loved ones tightly as you can with our social distancing precautions. We have to be there for each other. We have to pick each other up when we're down. Having friends and allies and family has never been more important. We need to be that good friend, that good neighbor, that good family member. And as much as possible, we need to widen our circles of compassion. And we need to widen our circles to include more people who don't always look like us. Finally, for healing, the formula says we need elevation. There are some people that we need to lift up. To a large extent, the ousting of Trump has been made possible by African American voters and amazing organizers like Stacey Abrams in Georgia. I was so glad that the president-elect acknowledged them, especially last night in his remarks. They deserve respect, gratitude, elevation. The other elevation I'm thinking of today is something that the Obamas have said: when they go low, we go high. I want to take you higher. It's hard going high when dealing with enemies. You know, Biden said that we're not enemies, we're Americans. And that's a nice sentiment, but not every American is my friend. I have to be real. Yes, Jesus said that we're supposed to love our enemies as well as our neighbors. But as much as I aspire to follow Jesus, I'm not going to ask you to give a metaphorical hug to the purveyors of Trumpism. Not right now. I'm thinking of something else Jesus said today. He said, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be therefore as wise as serpents and be as harmless as doves." When I ask you to go high when they go low, I'm asking you to remember that every person has inherent worth and dignity, even though not every idea is worthy or dignified, not every action is worthy or dignified. I'm asking you to embrace the humanity of your enemies, if you think of them that way, certainly of your opponents in this time. I'm asking you to embrace their humanity as much as you can, and I'm asking you to fight them peacefully, as harmless as doves. But we're fighting for our lives here, and good needs to triumph. I'm certainly not espousing violence. I am a near pacifist myself. I'm asking you to fight with a pen, not a sword. I'm asking you within the bounds of your own safety and well-being to stand up for what is right. To paraphrase a famous quotation, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. I'm asking you to be elevated, be the embodiment of going high. With the ousting of Trump, the active bleeding will stop, but the wound is still there and it's still open. It could easily become infected. We have to clean that wound to stave off infection. How? Part of the disease that is Trumpism is the total disregard of facts. It's the habit of making up facts. It's the habit of making declaratory statements that you want to be true and passing that off as fact or truth. We have to get back to a culture where facts matter. We have to get back to a culture that values the media and trusts it. We have to get back to a culture that values science and heeds it. In the context of COVID-19, our lives quite literally depend on it. We have to be the voices that consistently stand up for facts and responsible news and science. We have to be the people who stand up to those who do otherwise. We have to elevate the conversation. You know what? I might be a minister, but I'm very human. I have some Facebook friends that I have hidden, which means I haven't unfriended them, but I no longer see their posts. I couldn't stomach their Trumpism these past 4 years, but I need to unhide them. I need to be that voice for facts and responsible news and science. I need to call them out every time they post something even subtly racist or subtly white supremacist. I need to expel the energy it takes to object to their posts and that especially draining style of going high, even when they go low. Because I have some connection to these people. They are Facebook friends for a reason. They are either extended family or they are old friends from my youth or what have you. I need to use the connection that I have with these people and do my part, even though it's uncomfortable, to say the least. Everyone has to pick their battles and be mindful of their own well-being. But I am feeling called to do this. I think it's an important part of cleaning out this very fresh wound. And it's part of the work many people of color are calling on white people to do. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have said that they were fighting for the soul of America. In the end, I think there was much truth in that. There is much work ahead. Trump will be gone, but Trumpism clearly endures. As you heard in our Time for All Ages, Unitarian Universalism has a proud history of fighting fascism. We also have an imperfect but often proud history of working against racism. We've always had influence beyond our numbers, and we need to build on the best of our history. There's a lot of mythology about this nation of ours, starting with mythology about our founding and the motivations behind it. There's mythology about our Civil War and the motivations behind that. Today, we have the mythology that we are made up of red states and blue states, or at least of red rural areas and blue urban areas. But the truth is so much more complex than that. It's amazing that a country as big and diverse as ours has been able to hold it together for so long. But many of us, for the past 4 years, have been looking at this country and wondering, can this strange marriage of cultures and values last? And in fact, do enough of us truly hold the same values? The American empire is clearly waning. I'm not a fan of empires as a general rule. Neither was Jesus, for what it's worth. But it's a precarious time, and in some ways a sad time, for the powerhouse of America to be in decline. And perhaps it's natural for some ugly evil to rear its head during this time. And I think that's part of what we're seeing. Perhaps that accounts for some of the fear that drives Trumpism. Our demographics are quickly shifting too, and there are times when Trumpism feels in large part like the last gasp of white dominance. But we need to be careful that we don't get lazy and believe that the shifting demographics will automatically shift us into healing the wound of our racism, because it won't. Racism and white supremacy have been very carefully created and taught, and they need to be very carefully and deliberately dismantled and untaught. Institutionalized racism is real, and it is our work to make it history. It's not just 4 years of damage we need to repair and heal. It's more than 400 years of damage that we need to repair and heal. In closing, I take some comfort in knowing that Trumpism will go down in history as the nefarious phenomenon that it was. The specific phenomenon of Trumpism will eventually fade away, though not without some gnashing of teeth. That is part of the post-election work and healing that needs to happen. But the bigger wound and the longer healing process is ending white supremacy and white supremacy culture. We have our work cut out for us. It's sacred work. And it is our work to do for the rest of our lives. May we rise to this great task. Blessed be, and amen. Our closing hymn is number 95.
please join as you're willing and able to sing hymn 95. You'll see the first part of the words on one side of your screen and the end, the last phrase of words on the other side. This should be familiar. Sing it out.
Friends, it's time for our closing words. Oh, I so wish we were in person this morning, but if we were in person, as you know, we'd be here in the sanctuary together, and we would form something like a circle, and we would hold hands. So I ask you, if there's somebody there with you and you can safely hold hands, please do so now. Otherwise, if you're alone in the room, as I'm alone here in the sanctuary, you can clasp your hands together and feel that warmth. And remember this wonderful community, still here for each other, even though virtually gathered today. Our closing words. There is love and hope and joy somewhere. There is hope and love and joy here. It's ours to grab, it's ours to create. We have everything we need to build back the world. We don't know precisely what the future holds. Nobody ever does. But there are so many fundamentally good people in this country. Maybe some people have temporarily been led astray. Maybe it's our job to help bring them back. But we can do this. I believe that good will win. We will restore the soul of this people. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Please stick around for our postlude.
Our postlude today is a joyful collaboration between many, many different musicians and members of our congregation. Well, I hope you can sing along with us as well. This is Peace Train by Cat Stevens. You'll see some singers on screen. You'll also hear lots of them in the audio. So many thanks to everybody who contributed their voices and their instruments, and to Mike Pillman for putting it all together.